Hey there! Today we deal with something what is always around us. We are dependent on it and at the same time part of it, biodiversity. But what exactly is that? How much is there? And why it is so tremendously important? So please make yourself comfortable for the next couple of minutes, and here we go. Biodiversity comprises three fundamental pillars. First, species diversity. That's mainly meant when the general media talks about biodiversity, and it describes, well, the diversity of species. But that's just one part. The genetic diversity describes the genetic potential and diversity within one single species, like in those potatoes, or as well among us, humans. Habitat diversity is the third pillar of biodiversity and a measure of the diversity of habitats within a specific region. Let's have a closer look. Here are impressions of the Atlantic rainforest in southeastern Brazil. And although spatially they are relatively close to one another, there are quite obvious differences. That's also a part of biodiversity. Now back to species diversity. A first important point to wrap our heads around the diversity of life is an idea about how many species are out there. That means how many species of plants and how many species of animals. Today, approximately 350,000 species of plants are known to science. But there are far more animal species out there. Today, approximately 1.8 million species are described, whereas more than half of them are insects. But there's an estimate of around about 500,000 species of plants and up to 15 million species of animals which are still undiscovered today, mainly insects. Hence, we are far off a complete picture of the species community we share the planet with. And that's somewhat like managing a company without knowing their employees and having no idea what they do. Not really a feasible business model, but business as usual in our everyday behavior. And although we are not anywhere near a complete understanding of our environment, we are losing biodiversity on an unprecedented scale. Welcome to the Anthropocene, the new geological era in which mankind is the driving force of change on planet Earth. Okay, but why is this ongoing loss dangerous for our society? Everybody knows aspirin, for instance. The active substance originally derived from our living surroundings, like so many more in our modern medicine. But although 50% of all pharmaceuticals are based on plants, merely 2% of known plant substances have been tested for medical potential. Pollinators, an essential part of our well-being. Without them, our refrigerators would be rather empty. A decline of pollinating animals causes gaps in agricultural supply chains. These are only two examples of ecosystem services we all benefit from. When conditions change, like rising temperatures, all living organisms can only react in three ways. Move away from the unfavorable conditions, adapt to the changing conditions and become comfortable with it, die, become extinct. But at some point, the options where to run to might be exhausted, and extinction might be a less attractive choice. But adaptation requires opportunities. And those are provided by biodiversity. To protect biodiversity, the global community set up 20 targets for the United Nations Decade on Biodiversity between 2011 and 2020. Unfortunately, only 4 targets were achieved. There was some progress in extending protected areas, but without measuring their effectiveness. New national biodiversity strategies were developed, but without considering their implementation yet. It can become rather depressing at some point. And one could come to the conclusion we are willingly jumping off a cliff. Loss of biodiversity and climate change are the major challenges of our time. But we still have a chance. Cooperation and innovation, curiosity and empathy, science and education. All this creates facts to enable better decision-making. The 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are a global guideline for our society in the coming decade. Such international joint efforts are essential, not least in managing the ongoing pandemic, which in itself is a direct consequence of environmental degradation. And the next pandemic will be only a matter of time if the continued destruction of ecosystems increases the contacts among wildlife and humans. I want to close with a quote of Mr. Alexander von Humboldt, which maybe is of more relevance than ever. The most dangerous worldview is the worldview of those who have not viewed the world. Let's have a closer look at our world together again. During the sessions and discussions of the Dresden Nexus conference in 2022. To work for a more effective science policy interface on biodiversity issues and create public awareness for a better stewardship for vital resources. Thank you.